मौत के बाद भी इंसानी वक़ार को तस्लीम करने से मुनज़्ज़म इनकार. A systematic refusal to recognize human dignity even after life ends. For some, state oppression does not stop at the grave. This is the reality of the cold archive, Munjamid Khazane. It is an infrastructure made up of morgue freezers and nameless, numbered graves. Their specific function is to imprison Palestinian bodies, keeping even children in permanent state custody. The human cost is measured in the testimony of those left behind. One Palestinian mother described the impact of her son's confiscation. Every time I open my freezer, I remember my son. The seizure of remains functions as a calculated colonial policy, operating with an intent that reaches far beyond the immediate end of life. To understand the mechanics of this system, we have to examine it through the lens of international law. Doing so reveals an administrative framework built on collective punishment. As we look closer at the infrastructure of this archive, we must ask, does this system serve a practical administrative need, or is its real power found in the psychological weight it places on Palestinian families? This grid represents 78 verified cases of Palestinian children whose bodies have been confiscated. 57 are currently held in morgue freezers, locked in indefinite storage. The remaining 21 children have been buried in secret military cemeteries, marked only by numbers. In many of these 21 cases, families remained entirely unaware of their child's fate. They only discovered the burial by chance, sometimes waiting a year or more before learning where the remains had been taken. The physical environment is distinctly industrial. Bodies are kept in sterile, stainless steel refrigerators, turning the organic process of mourning into a cold administrative procedure. Capturing, processing, and storing 78 children requires a vast logistical infrastructure. It is an institutionalized system of erasure, operating with daily bureaucratic precision. The systematic erasure of human identity is achieved through a strict, four-step bureaucratic process. Phase 1 begins when the victim is last seen alive, often injured or taken into custody. Phase 2 follows with a sudden official announcement of their death, but the state refuses to produce the body for verification. Then the administrative blockade begins. In Phase 3, the state denies the family a death certificate. Phase 4 enforces a total ban that prohibits the family from accessing the remains. This legal erasure is mirrored by a physical one. Any trace of the person's identity, their name and their history, is stripped away and sealed inside military files. A traditional headstone is replaced by a flat concrete marker. Instead of a name, the deceased is reduced to a barcode and a serial number. These bodies are then deposited into closed military zones, inaccessible to the public, hidden across grassy, desolate hillsides, marked only by rusted metal plates. This four-step process serves to permanently transfer ownership of a human being away from their family and into the custody of the colonial state apparatus. To see how this system works in practice, we can look at the 2024 case of Wadi al-Layan. Wadi was killed by Israeli soldiers following allegations that he carried out an attack. Following his death, his body was confiscated and held in a morgue freezer, denying his family immediate closure. The family was kept entirely in the dark. They eventually learned, only after the fact, that he had already been moved and buried in a numbered grave. Faced with an opaque military system, his father was forced to choose between speaking out and risking retribution or choosing silence and patience. They are now relying on a slow court process just to retrieve his remains. Wadi's case demonstrates the ultimate power play, dictating not only how a Palestinian dies, but if and when they are ever allowed to rest. Securing the dead is only half the equation. To prevent families from protesting this deprivation, the state deploys 4 distinct silencing tactics against the living. The first is direct intimidation. Military raids on family homes often include explicit threats. As one mother was told, "If you mourn, you will never see your son's body." Second and third are institutional threats and media censorship. Officers contact families directly, threatening legal action if they don't drop court cases, which often forces families into silence to avoid jeopardizing their chance of retrieving the body. The fourth tactic is social suppression. The state forces the closure of traditional mourning tents,
effectively criminalizing the cultural act of collective grief. Stripped of their rituals, these families are forced to carry their trauma in isolation. The numbered graves keep their grief unresolved and unhealed. When administrative overreach targets a mother's right to mourn, the policy shifts from a matter of security to a method of total social control. Since the 1960s, Israel justified holding bodies for state security or prisoner exchanges. A new 2024 law allows the execution of prisoners with almost zero accountability, raising fears that more bodies will disappear into unmarked burials. But this entire framework collapses under international law. Under Article 3 of the Geneva Conventions, all parties are legally bound to care for and respect the wounded, the sick, and the dead. Using human corpses as political hostages or leverage in negotiations is a direct violation of international law and constitutes a war crime. This table maps out the deficit. Fundamental human rights dictate a dignified burial and a place for closure. The reality forced upon Palestinians is the seizure of bodies, denial of cemetery access, and a deliberate, unending psychological wound. The security narrative is a thin bureaucratic veil. It serves to obscure an agenda that seeks to control Palestinian lives, even in death. The confiscation of bodies represents a highly organized, systematic form of psychological punishment directed at Palestinian families. By denying a dignified burial, the state ensures that the wounds of an entire nation remain perpetually open, forcing families to wait in agonizing silence.
And yet, the international community watches. The mechanisms of international justice remain stalled, while the world observes this cruelty in silence. उम्मत मुस्लिमा की खामोशी और बेहिस्सी इस बर्बरियत को मज़ीद हवा दे रही है. The complacency and silence of the Muslim Ummah only serves to fuel this barbarism. Global pressure must be applied to halt this modern colonial terrorism. The world must demand the dismantling of the Cold Archive and the restoration of the most basic human right, the right to rest in peace.